All right, what's up, everybody? Can everybody hear me? One's in the chat if you can hear me. Good to see everybody. Happy Thursday. I just got back from HEB, got some coffee. Not at HEB, but we're ready to rock and roll. Hey, thanks for everybody for coming by yesterday. I had a good time talking Bigfoot. So we'll give everybody a couple minutes to roll in here. So tonight we are going to be talking about vision quests, sun dances, ghost dances. It's a really fascinating evolution that happened to the tribes throughout a couple centuries. So what we're going to be talking about is how these traditions played into the plains culture specifically. Like these are continent-wide traditions, and every tribe has their own iteration of it. Right? Every culture worldwide has their own version of it. Pennsylvania Plowboy, what's up, man? Pet detectives, good to have you guys in here. OGs of the HOKC live chat. Yeah, we're going to be examining how these are really cross-cultural phenomenons, some of the more extreme aspects of what the Plains tribes did. And of course, you're probably asking, can we tie all this back into MK Ultra talk? We can absolutely do that. We will be doing that. So yeah, we're just going to be hanging out and shooting the breeze about this sometimes horrifying subject. Dan Robertson, what's up? Yeah, Vision Quest Peak. Yeah, we're going to be talking pretty much about that on the Balcones Escarpment near Comanche Peak. Okay. Yeah, that's a beautiful area too. All right, so we'll dive into the meat and potatoes of it here. First, we're going to go into this sun dance. So it's a pretty common thing throughout the Plains tribes' history, but it becomes more and more common the more kind of consternation they go through dealing with American encroachment. So the more confused and the more helpless they seem to feel, you see it popping up as kind of a spiritual solution to a temporal problem. You would really see this really peak after the smallpox epidemics, which started south and then worked their way north, and it was just absolutely devastating. Like you're talking losses sometimes close to 50%, which I mean, like you can imagine, right? Like it is just irrecoverable in many instances. So the Sundances really kind of started taking off after that. What they were was part proving ground and part penance and part sacrificial ritual. What they would do, a lot of you, if you're familiar with Old West history, you're probably familiar with the basics of it. They'd pinch the skin on their pectorals right here, and then put a lot of people think of it as a hook, right? It's even worse than that. If you see like circus performers, sideshow performers today, you'll see them hanging from hooks, right? And it's horrific, but this is even worse than that in my estimation, because what they would do is poke a little hole right there and then pass a sinew through it and then do the same on the other side and like knock them off. And then what they would do, a lot like current day sideshow performers, is like swing around. And it was a way to show their endurance. And they would dance most of, if not this entire time. And it's a way to show your endurance because they're doing this for hours, days at a time, where they're just getting a rhythmic chant going. Sometimes it was like kind of ad hoc, started by the medicine man. He would just kind of get something going. I have coffee in my mouth again. I'm gonna lose my mind. I don't know. That's just the way. That's just a deformity, I guess. But yeah, they would get this chant going. The more northern you go on the plains, it seems the more complex these ceremonies get because they're relatively stratified and organized with the Blackfoot. And then by the time you work your way south, it gets more and more simple. And by the time you get to the Comanche, they really didn't have any ceremonies even akin to that until 1870s, really, when they were at the very limits of what they were able to do. So the really common theme in it is your endurance. It's a way for young men in particular to prove their worth without going to combat or before they're able to go to combat. So you can show these traits, this stoicism, this endurance in a way that doesn't require combat. So it wouldn't require you to lose lots of young men either. And it was usually seasonal. So summertime, in between hunts, kind of pre-winter sometimes in the fall, looking for good hunts, success in battle, staving off the smallpox epidemic, any of those things, trying to call fortune from their spirits. And theologically, the tribes can get a little scattered. Like there's not a lot of cohesion other than some origin stories, and then they say we got to appease these spirits. They're not necessarily gods like you would see in the Greco-Roman sense. It's more like spirits. It's a lot of animism, where they kind of talk to, or they worshipped a buffalo in a spiritual sense, or asked for the spirits from the antelope or the elk or whatever. Everything kind of had its own medicine, and you would try to appease these things and appease this kind of great creator, but there's not a lot of definition to it. It was a pretty fluid thing throughout the tribes. But yeah, it would be a seasonal thing. What they would do is obviously, they'd poke the holes in their skin, but all this stuff starts with the purification, right? Which we're going to kind of talk about the cross-cultural, uh, commonalities in this. How, I mean, centuries, eons before the 19th century on the plains, tribes or peoples like the Spartans and the Romans and the Chinese, the Japanese, like these are very common cross-cultural ceremonies, right? You have a purification ritual, especially for young men. You have a purification ritual, some kind of test of bravery or stoicism or endurance, and then you're kind of accepted into the fold still at the bottom rung of a warrior class, but that's how you kind of make your bones, right? You prove that you've got the necessary qualities. That's really what's going on here. So what they would do is do it seasonally. Let's see, their ceremonial preparation would usually be some kind of sweat lodge. And that's an interesting practice in and of itself. Different tribes would have different ways of building them, basically just because of what was available to them. But that is be it with the Comanche or all the way up to the Assiniboine and the Blackfoot, a super common uh, practice, right? They would kind of lump all these things, branches and everything, onto a super thick lodge, and then heat stones up in a fire, and then put those stones into a pit, and then dump water on top of that. And they would just stay in there as long as you could. That was kind of a pre-test, right? But you would sweat all the impurities out of yourself. Usually that's followed immediately by a cold plunge. And so you can see, I mean, this is like Northern European, Eastern European practices, right? This sauna and a cold plunge. They believed it was good for the health and good for the spirit too. So they kind of get on the level with a spiritual purification. Then usually most of the tribes give some kind of offering, like vermilion paint was very valuable. You know, gunpowder, tobacco, eagle feathers, that kind of varied, but you could see whatever was valuable to the tribe. A lot of times tobacco is kind of universally valuable. They give up some kind of offering of that. Painting yourself was very common. Red was a very common color. It's a sacrificial, um, you know, bellicose kind of color. Then after the purification and the painting, you would kind of start this ceremony. And it sounds like a lot of them started kind of like just like a gathering in the park, maybe, where it's like everybody's just kind of like milling around and you're waiting for the main guy to give the go ahead, but there's not a lot of formality until things start. Then once things get underway, guys are like helping you. This is like usually a male only thing. I think there are certain accounts from certain tribes, especially later on as things got more desperate, of women being included, never children, but women. And nobody, let's say no children, but nobody under, probably men would start 14, somewhere in there. Um, Check the chats real quick. Mojo says, in the gym. All right. Good job, man. I just got done myself. So you got to keep that pump. You know what I mean? You're going to be ready for the Sundance. Oh, Mojo just became a supporter, man. Welcome to the club. Thank you very much. Let's see. Bama Deanna says, I've been a subscriber for a long time. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're adding these live streams so we can kind of, add stuff that doesn't really fit into the episodes. I had a hard time describing the Sundance and Vision Quests in their totality in episodes, because it's like, it is kind of a side note. You don't have that much time to delve into the specifics of it. So That's what we're doing here. Mojo says, you deserve this membership. Man, thank you very much. And we're happy to have you on board. And if anybody else wants to be a member, you can click the membership button down below. I should know I think it's the dollar sign. Yeah. Yeah, we're trying to build up the membership as well. We'll be doing members only live streams and stuff like that. People seem to like this. So we'll be doing plenty of live streams. I have a good time doing these. Okay, so back to the Sundance. After the sweat lodge, after being painted, after they actually build the lodge, they have a specialized lodge that they build with it looks like a circus tent. No, all due respect to the actual ceremony, it's the best cultural cross reference that we have. It looks like a circus tent with all these pillars on the top of it, or they go into the center of the roof. And then off of those is what the straps, the leather tongs or leather thongs are strapped to. And then they go down to the guy's chest. And they basically just dance and swing, and everybody's singing the same song. And this just goes, the song can be like one line, right? So if you can imagine, like, I don't know, it's like jumping jack flash over and over for like just that part. Jumping jack flash, it's a gas, gas, gas. But just that part for like 48 hours while you kind of go back and forth. And really, as the closest thing I could come to bring a modern day visual about is probably like an EDM concert, like a rave, where it's like, yeah, it's a very repetitive music. Everyone's kind of in a crowd and moving in this collective kind of way. And once you get that going, and once you have something to prove on top of it, and you're trying to call down celestial favor, they were going for an extraordinary amount of time. Like I said, days at a time. And I think you don't want to underestimate, like, sure, do a lot of us believe in the spiritual aspect of it? Actually, I think that's kind of an interesting question. Like, were they calling in spirits? Like, I don't know, right? Whether you think they were good or bad, like, does it really work to call in spirits? I don't know. Maybe they were, right? But it does speak to this collective, I don't want to say hive mind, but this uh, collective hive mind, uh, where you're kind of feeding off the energy of everyone else. You're you kind of pull your endurance from those around you, right? And it kind of, everyone's mind kind of melds into this one collective thing. And to me, I mean, this has plenty of historical precedent. What came to the front of my mind was, I had to take notes of this on my phone. It's the big dancing psychosis in the Middle Ages. It is called, I think it was St. John's dance. Yeah, it's called St. John's dance. It's referred to as dancing mania, but in the 14th through the 17th centuries, which is a long time, right? This dancing mania would hit major cities like Paris. I know was one of the hubs for this, where people would just start dancing. It was like a flash mob, right? But without the fun. And people would start dancing, like just kind of going like this, and very rarely chanting, just dancing. And then somebody else would join in, and somebody else would join in. And eventually you would have hundreds, sometimes thousands of people just dancing for hours in this kind of medieval conga line. So it's not unheard of. This has plenty of precedent in history, right? And then all the way back to ancient tribes, war dances and stuff like that. And what it does is serve to get everybody on the same level. We're kind of putting our psychic power in one direction, and it takes away the individuality, which is a really important part of things when you live in a very small tribe in a very dangerous area. So you become part of the collective. Like your mind is centered on the tribe away from oneself. And then also, like, they believe this is one of the only ways to kind of restore balance to a world that they had seen completely thrown off in the last couple of decades. Let's see. Stories by Kate says, does the repeating help them into a trance-like state of mind? Yeah, and maybe to dissociate themselves from the pain. Absolutely. And that's kind of what we're going to jump into at the end of this here, is like how this is carried on. This wasn't only a historic thing. This is carried on well into the 20th century. And I think the best example of that is MK Ultra. So we'll be shamelessly tagging that onto the end, because I know we all like to talk good conspiracy stuff. Okay, so variations by tribe. You kind of got the basic framework of it, right? And I don't know, I kind of hesitated on saying this because I don't want to get too graphic for TOS, right? But if you could get it, the goal was to get it to tear, right? If you could get it, if you could go so crazy that your skin gave out, that's when you're like, this dude gets it. This guy's about it, right? That was a way to really show that you're in. So, and then you would kind of, that was, if you had those marks, that was like, oh, this guy's legit. Very common to, this is kind of a dangerous analogy, but it's true, especially the World War One officers that became World War II officers, right? But people would say, like, why do they have, it's a common question, why do they have these marks on their face? It's like makes them look even more sinister, right? But why do they all have them? And it's because the military academies had fencing, and German fencing is this, it's like you just stand there and like whip at each other, and they just wear these little goggles. So you're just like whipping these sabers at each other, and whoever draws blood first wins. And so they all had these scars, and it was like a mark of like, oh, this guy went to the military academy. He's a trustworthy officer. Bama Deanna with the $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Adventures of Pet Detectives with $5. Thank you all very, very much. Really appreciate that. It's a good time to jump on, and it's fun to jump on and talk about this stuff. So thank you so much. Okay. Tribal variations here. How does this vary? We're talking about how it goes from north to south, right? But even in tribes that are in relatively close proximity to each other, a fair amount of variation. The Lakota, that's the classic, like they did the classic style piercing through the chest. I hate to keep doing this, but it's a good visual representation. And they had the sacred hoop of life. So there was this circular notion of spirituality, and that's kind of was their great spirit, and they would focus on that, which is kind of rare. Like the Comanche didn't really have anything like that. As you go farther south, with the exception of the Kiowa, the theology gets more and more simplistic or stripped down. The Blackfoot had the medicine lodge ceremony. They all had different names for it. Like Sundance is really more of a Lakota term, but it was all kind of the same ceremony, right? Let's see. The medicine lodge ceremony, it was theirs was more of a renewal rite and less emphasis on endurance and you know pain tolerance. The Arapaho, Kiowa, Crow, and Comanche, which is quite the grouping, but they all had these similar things in common. They each maintained localized spiritual emphasis. So like they concentrate on the buffalo or the eagle, like I said, the antelope. There was a lot of animism, especially as you got farther south. Okay, and the purpose we talked about that being a test of spirit, a way to show one's martial prowess without actually competing in combat or partaking in combat. Let's see. And usually you didn't see older men doing this. This was like a younger guy thing to do. Like I said, it's a way to prove yourself, and there was no real reason for older men to have to prove themselves. And it's kind of like watching football practice or something, right? Where it's like the old guys sit in the lawn chairs and watch, and the young guys go through it. Let's see. And I mean, that's uh, kind of a general summation of the Sundance, right? So if you got that in mind, and somebody says that a tribe was doing a Sundance, and you hear it was the Blackfoot, you'll have a general idea of that now. And we're going to kind of talk about Sundances a lot. I think really the most pertinent example that we had lately is the second Battle of Adobe Walls, because like we said, like I said, the Comanche didn't have a terribly complex religion, right? So as things got more and more desperate for them in the 1870s, they started leaning more and more on prophets and medicine men, which had never been there. They didn't have a predilection for that to begin with. But this guy named Issa Tai had convinced them in the 1870s that, hey, I could fly, I can see into the future. If we paint ourselves this way, bullets won't touch us. And he even convinced Quanah Parker, who was like, in general, like a pretty practical guy. But he got Quanah to buy in. He was boys with Quanah, and they decided, like, if we go to Adobe Walls and drive these guys out, they're never going to come back, and we're just going to overrun them. And then within like the first couple hours, a bunch of Comanche got shot, and they're kind of like pissed off at Issa Tai, right? And he's going like, it's not my fault, man. Like, it's the Cheyenne. They ate a raccoon yesterday. Blame them. And that became a big argument. But Issa Tai even remained relatively popular after that. And this kind of adherence to the Sundance practices did continue for a lot of these tribes, Comanche included, after coming to the reservation. So the next thing, you know what? We'll cover, yeah, let's do vision quests next. So the vision quest itself is another very common motif worldwide in cultures, especially warrior cultures that need a rite of passage for their young men, right, to prove themselves. In my mind, the most analogous thing to this is the Spartan agoge, where at 7 years old, if you've ever seen 300, they do a pretty good job of showing this, where like at 7 years old, they take the kid away and they put him into military training, and they'd go through military training, I believe, for till they were 18, somewhere around there. And they would have to kill a slave. And it did vary. Like they either have to steal something or kill a slave, and they would have to get away without being caught, and a bunch of other stuff, right? That's a very similar thing to the Plains tribes. So what the Vision Quest entailed was, first you had to go through the Vision Quest, right? And then you would get your assignments on your rite of passage. So the Vision Quest would be different from tribe to tribe, but usually involved going out in the woods by yourself, staying awake and not eating for anywhere from 48 hours to 3 or 4 days. And you would keep yourself awake, and eventually you'd start seeing something. Whatever you saw would give you this kind of spiritual message that was up to you to interpret, maybe take back to the elders and see what they thought that meant. But that was supposed to be a guiding force for the rest of your life. The most famous one I've heard of, like of an individual, is Crazy Horse, who went into the mountains in South Dakota. And this was a common Lakota thing, I guess. They would put rocks in between their toes, and that would keep them awake. And they just sit on this rock and kind of wait to see something, which sounds easy enough, right? But then it's like they're there for 48 hours, 72 hours. Starts to suck, I'm sure. But he saw a horse running around, and he came back, and they were like, yeah, your name's Crazy Horse now, and you're going to be Crazy Horse. But a lot of tribes had different, it's like the Sundance, they had different iterations of the same thing. And usually it's taking a boy from boyhood into manhood. The Crow tribe would combine it with a first coup, right? You had to touch somebody in battle with a coup stick. And this kind of began their ascension up the martial ladder, right? They would start at the bottom rung of a warrior, meaning like you're not going to be in the thick of battle, but just getting a coup on somebody is a good start. So you go through this vision quest, you count a coup, and then you're in the club. You're at the bottom of the ladder. We've referred to it on live streams before as an internship program, where you start at the bottom, you're unpaid, but you can work your way up to chief. It's just you have to get that internship first. The Blackfoot had a fasting quest, and they were big on horse thieving. Like, so this is a cultural thing too, because this is a completely different mindset from especially like Christian European view. Like they say, no, stealing is bad. On the Plains, it's a different deal. I think a lot of it has to do with their view of other tribes, certainly as often as less than. The people, the tribes would usually name themselves the people. If you look at the definitions for Namarnu, the Comanche term, or Dine, the Navajo term, it means the people. And that doesn't mean like we're the special people. It doesn't mean, we are a people. It means we're the people, and they're not, right? So they don't oftentimes view their opposing tribes as worthy of the same dignity of themselves, right? So stealing from them was completely justified, completely honorable. And if you didn't steal from them, they were going to steal from you, right? So it was a very important part of Plains tribes economy. And S.E. Gwynn makes the point in Summer of the Empire Moon. Taking horses was like taking fistfuls of $100 bills from an ATM. Like this was a way to just increase your wealth exponentially kind of overnight, right? So it was a very important skill. See, the Comanche and the Kiowa, same thing. They would test themselves through a vision quest and then steal a horse. And then they start kind of working their way up. Then you're making attacks, then you're there's not a lot of coup counting in the Comanche or the Kiowa culture. It's more kind of just you're on the outer range of the battle. And then as you get better, you work your way in towards the middle. All right, let's see. And also there's coming of age ceremonies for girls. Usually it revolves around the menstrual cycle. Blackfoot had a Buffalo woman ceremony. The Apache had a sunrise ceremony. The Lakota had a first moon ceremony. They're all kind of the same thing. Like they usually like make the girls go sleep in another tent and do some purification ritual. I know our audience right now is like 90% male, so that should suffice, right? Like you guys get what I'm saying. But it wasn't a gender specific thing. Like each each sex had their own ritual, and to move into adulthood, it was an absolute necessity. And again, every culture has that. Let's see. Let's check the chat real quick. Any questions? Want to chip in anything? Do you think you could survive a Sundance? Let me put that as a poll. Let's see. Would you participate in a Sundance? Yes or no? Let's see who's here. Arizona KR6, good to see you. Let's see. Arizona says, "Kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya." Yeah, man, it's kind of the same thing, right? Regardless of what culture you're in, all music is kind of a spell, right? It's words and sounds to a very specific beat. So that's always kind of fascinating to me how it's like they all use it for the same thing. Whether it's like mumble rap or Blackfoot chanting, right? Like it's all for the same purpose. You're getting people into a certain mood or mindset, right? Was there a certain age that they did this? Short Stories by Kate asked. Yeah, so, just as they're getting into adolescence, 13, 14, somewhere in there. Dan Robertson says they would pack the wounds from, the Germans would pack the wounds from fencing with wool in order to make the scar more pronounced. That's right. That's right. Yeah. It was a baller thing to have, like a tattoo. And I just learned that in the last couple months. I was always wondering that. If it wasn't for YouTube Shorts, I would miss out on a lot of history. Which brings me to the point of watch our YouTube Shorts. We got lots of them out now. We're trying to put out at least one a day, and I think we got some interesting ones. The survival of your tribe and their own life was very connected. Survival of the fittest. Yeah, absolutely. It was, like I said too, you're looking at yourself as this isn't universal, right? And this isn't meant to degrade anyone's sense of cultural independence, let's say, right? But it is saying, by and large, like, we're the people and you're not the people. You're not the people. So different rules for different players, right? Blackfoot mumble rap might be interesting. I mean, it might be better than the original product, right? Let's see. I know me, and that would. Oh, Pet Detective says no thank you on the Sundance. Yeah, no thank you for me either. No thank you for me on the Sundance. I'll try a little Vision Quest. We'll try a Vision Quest. If you've ever wrestled in your life in the last 30, probably last 40 years, the movie Vision Quest, that I'm sure has played a major role in your life. And it's a good example of putting oneself through a test of endurance and stoicism. Almost said stoitude, but that ain't a word. But yeah, there's every culture has one. Like I said, the thing that came most to my mind was the Spartan Agoge, but it's like universal, right? The samurai had their rights, the knights had their rights. Any militaristic martial culture, and even religions, right? Baptism, confirmation, stuff like that. All right, so yeah, I wrote some common themes across these ceremonies too. Suffering and sacrifice. It wasn't just in a penitential sense. A fair amount of that, like there was some of that mixed in there, but in a self-purifying sense and in a demonstrable sense, like showing the others that you can be counted on. Because what these guys are going to do, the bread and butter of their life, is to go out in the middle of nowhere in small little groups and do very dangerous things, whether that's hunting or raiding, all of which, if anybody weakens, if we have one weak link in the chain, things can go terribly wrong and nobody comes back, right? So everybody has to depend on all their men being dependable. Let's see. Yeah, balance between the individual and the tribe. So yeah, just creating a cohesive mindset, which wasn't a luxury to them. It was something that our livelihood depends on, right? Like not seeing oneself as an individual, seeing oneself as a part of a collective that's there to serve the collective. Let's see. And we covered the vision quest. All right, any questions? Let's see what we're at. About half an hour. All right, all right. I'll check the questions real quick and then we'll kind of extrapolate this into the modern day. Each tribe sounds like they were so self-dependent, too dangerous to interact with other tribes, probably. In the case of people that didn't get along, yes, but they weren't necessarily. I mean, nobody lives in a vacuum, right? So there's always lots of trade between neighbors, and it's very much a case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and you would see that vacillate and shift a lot. And another big point is that okay, when we got here, let's say when we got to Texas, so the Comanche were here basically, right? When the Spanish got here, the Apache were just getting driven out by the Comanche, but the Comanche were basically new arrivals. So all of their neighbors were new neighbors. So we didn't really have uh, there wasn't a long established contact. Same thing for the Blackfoot, the Lakota. They had come over from the Great Lakes regions, 2 centuries or so before. So that's still like you're relatively new arrivals in this neighborhood. You're still kind of figuring out the neighbors, and some of them you get along with, and that's great, and some of them you don't. But it wasn't there wasn't a lot of like ideological stands. It was just like if you had killed one of their guys, they were going to kill one of yours. But if you were a French trading company coming through with stuff we can use, then we can talk. Pragmatism largely ruled the day. Let's see. That depended on food. Yeah, this all depended on basically hunting grounds. If people wouldn't really move if they had enough to sustain themselves. And that's why the buffalo were so important. Tribes would fight all out wars of extermination to make sure they got the best hunting grounds. Because if you don't get those hunting grounds, what are you going to eat? You're going to be left with small game, root vegetables, and you can see the tribes that were on the outer skirts or in the deserts that had been relegated to areas away from the buffalo hunts or from the buffalo herds, and it was just an incredibly tough life. Whereas, living next to the buffalo herds and hunting the buffalo is incredibly dangerous and incredibly hard life, but you got a lot more to eat. And it provides everything else you need. It builds your clothing, it builds your teepees, it builds everything. So life was really, yeah, based around just like today, right? Your quality of life is largely determined by your real estate. Location, location, location. And yeah, oh, Onyet says they moved with the seasons. They did, but yes, they did, but within territorial ranges. So like the Blackfoot weren't going to go down to Arizona, right? Like they're going to stay in this kind of modern day Montana area. What do we see with the chat here? You guys said 60% of you would participate in a Sundance. All right, we're going to have an official HOKC Sundance and see who really shows up. I'm a staunch no on that one, guys. All right. So we're going to jump into how these same practices are carried out through the modern day. We've kind of looked at how they have been applied through history, right? But we use them. We use these same practices up till today. I think with proving one's worth rituals, you see everything from internships, apprenticeships, all the way up to modern day military boot camp. And especially boot camp employs a lot of these same rituals, like making one endure, whether it's just like standing there for a long time, going on runs and physical training. And then in that, they employ chants, they employ music. It's all using the same principles to indoctrinate, right? Might be a less charitable way of looking at it, or to ingrain the idea of yourself being part of a collective. Because if it's just one guy chanting, that gets old pretty quick, right? But when people start joining you, you start to feel a little different about it. So it's just another common iteration, and that's these boot camps have been run like that for 100 years. So since World War I or so, with that kind of structure, especially in America. So it's still being used. We see it in sporting events. We see it. We talked about raves, EDM concerts, obviously concerts in general. Short stories by Kate says billionaires of the day. Yeah, yeah. They certainly had uh, the real estate, right? They would have good years and bad years, but they still have the real estate. Let's see. Just want to check the chat real quick. Yeah, but so we see them all the way up to today, and we promised that we would tie this back into some. This isn't really conspiracy talk, but it's we can talk about MK Ultra a little bit and how the U.S. government employed this research. They obviously you have plenty of historical precedent, but they know chants, music, rhythm, repetition has a profound effect on the human mind. But it wasn't until post World War II they were able to delve into discovering how you could manipulate this for good or bad, right? But they did. That's mostly bad. Like there was all kinds of experiments where people were dosed with high levels, like 1,000 times what you're supposed to take of psychedelics. They would conduct these experiments in brothels so that the people that were there wouldn't want to disclose what happened to them or where they were. But then they would subject them to isolation, repeated music, all just sounds, rhythms, visualizations that were meant to see like how far you could push the human mind, how much you could program it, what it would take to program it. uh, so they really delved into the how of the of the human brainwashing equation, right? Just gonna check the chat real quick. Yeah, and they allegedly created lots of Manchurian candidates, right? And that's like kind of what you're trying to do with the war dance is convince people to go carry out things that they may not view themselves as capable of, may not be capable of without this programming. And programming is different things, right? But a war chant is programming of sorts. And really what the US government did, the Soviets did this, the Chinese did this, but we're in America, so the most pertinent example that we have is MK Ultra. And that has shaped or like I said, we see this repetition, we see the use of music, we see the use of certain visuals that really the use of has been propagated by MK Ultra. They use them in our commercials, they use them in our music, they use them in our TV shows, and these very specific principles like repetition, like the rhythm of even a conversation, but the rhythm of music, the hertz that the music is played at. I believe what was it? Can somebody let me know in the chat? It used to be what 334 and now it's 434, something like that. But the actual wavelength that you listen to music at has been changed. um, yeah, and just the same way that you would program one's mind collectively through chants and through ceremonies has been studied and granulated over the last 75 years or so. Distilled probably is the best word for it, where we've taken these concepts and applied them to our culture in a mass way. Elite Super Grunt says, yeah, neuro linguistic programming, absolutely, where you just keep saying something without you use someone's name. So it's like me, you would keep saying Brandon in the conversation when you're trying to emphasize a point, and it personalizes it, and that repetition just you know embeds it into someone's subconscious, and that's all you need. And then you just keep doing that, and you can change the tenor, you can change the entire scope of someone's thinking. I mean, that's kind of what Stockholm syndrome is, right? Is the war dance a form of pumping up the team like a good football coach? Yeah, absolutely. It's like you just have to change someone's mindset, and you have to have a ritualized, collectivized way to do it so that when you need to put these guys in a certain mindset, and it's not brainwashing, right? It's just flipping a switch. It's uh, capitalizing on a natural instinct. But yeah, what they're doing is saying like, this is what we need. We need them to be in this mindset before we go out on a raid. So we're going to do these things. It's a way to formalize that in a relatively reliable way. And we do that now. We, like you said, we do that in the locker room before football games. We do it with commercials, previews for shows, right? It gets you in that mindset. Oh, we're going to watch a scary movie. We're going to watch a funny show. It doesn't take long, right? It's a 30-second commercial, but you could have just watched a whatever true crime documentary. And if a 30-second funny song comes on an intro for the next show, you're in the mood for a funny show now. It's very predictable. It's, it's not something that's so much it's based in science, not so much pseudoscience. We think of it in terms of, tin hat conspiratorial thinking. And it's like, no, this really happened. It was disclosed in 1972, 73. And there's lots of sub projects to it. So Project Monarch, Project Bluebeam, what else? Obviously, Project Operation Paperclip. So Operation Paperclip was when we brought over the German scientists after World War II. That basically populated NASA. That's basically what made the moon missions doable at all. Project Bluebeam basically I think, is that the alien one, fake aliens, or is that the one that controls the media? And then Project Monarch, I'm switching those two up, but Google those. Those are good ones. Let's see. Popping into the chat again. Elite Super Grunt says he learned neuro-linguistic programming from picking up girls. I mean, I'm not encouraging that, but yeah, those were really popular with the pickup artists shows in the early 2000s. Like Mystery. Do you remember Mystery? He would wear like goggles on the top of his head. And he's like, you just have to talk to girls about like, you know, sun dances, and then change the subject to whatever, right? Football. Yeah, I learned neurolinguistic programming from watching pickup artists. Hey, I mean, if it works, it works, Let's see. Anybody else in here know about MK Ultra? I don't know how loud we can say that, but it's common knowledge now. But yeah, when I was reading about this, I was like, wow, this is like the same principles that the government applied to getting everybody on a collective same wavelength after World War II. Let's see. The war dance and psyching up their warriors was life or death, so it was all or nothing. Must have been intense. Yeah, I think a lot of times we look at it with this kind of detached, almost comic view, maybe, where you think like, oh, it's a war dance, or you see, maybe you hear the word dance and it takes away some of the gravity from it, but it's like, no, this is absolutely life or death. And if you don't win, if you don't win, you're going to be tortured till the end. If you're defending your village, I mean, your whole family is going to be taken prisoner. Best case scenario. And this can happen at any time. This can be, on like a Saturday evening. It could be a Tuesday morning. And that's just the way life was. It could happen right after you brought home a great haul from a buffalo hunt and you think life is wonderful. And then boom, your village gets attacked. And it just went on and on and on like that for centuries. Dan Robertson says, oh yeah, MK Ultra was responsible for the Manson family. Yeah. Obviously, like, we can't prove that, but once you look into that, I think that's a pretty solid case. People would say the same about John David Chapman, about Hinckley, Sirhan, obviously Lee Harvey Oswald. And it is a very odd thing behind all of those stories that these guys were completely innocuous, citizens, and then committed these heinous crimes. Two of them were caught with, two of them had a Catcher in the Rye on them, which is a book that the theory is posited that that's like a switch flipper, right? Like either possessing that book or reading parts of that book is what they're programmed, is what's programming, they are programmed for that to switch the flip the switch in them, and then they go do whatever they were trained to do. And I'm not saying that's real or not real. I'm just saying that's the theory. Walking horse says, "Oh, let me explain a little better, my friend. The sun dance is a holy ceremony in which we honor the women. It has nothing to do with one's endurance or bravery. It is a prayer for the people." Yeah, are you? Let's see. What tribe are you from? Because we were talking about that with the Blackfoot, where like it's less of an endurance, a demonstration of endurance. It's not so much a war thing. Yes, it's like more of a holy ceremony, honoring the tribe, asking for good things to happen. Yeah, let me know what tribe you're from. Let's see. Oh, Yanette says they had mushrooms. Um, there was an amount of psychedelics available, like peyote is certainly popular with the Comanche. But I think people think of a lot of this stuff being psychedelic driven. They even think of tobacco being like smoked all the time. And like the natives knew that wasn't great for you. They didn't have access to large amounts of it. And they had to be cogent most of the time, right? So I think a lot of that is overestimated. Not completely untrue, but like overestimated. Warriors don't need a vision quest with pervitin powder. What's pervitin power? You gonna get me flagged for that? Is that a word I'm not supposed to say? Anybody else have anything I'm missing on MK Ultra? And what do you think? What do you think about my analogy? Is there something to be? Is there any validity to that? Where it was like they're using the same principles that the tribes have used for centuries. Elite Super Grunt asks, did they have any wacky tobacco? Not as much as you would think. It grew wild, but it's not. It wasn't like a cornerstone of their culture. Oh, Pervitin was World War II speed, right? Yeah, that's where I've heard it before. Yeah, though, like, yeah, any kind of, I think, usually narcotics play a role in warfare of some kind, but also, like, they weren't going to go into battle just, zonked out of their mind. And a lot of times, what you would see was a lot of fasting before going into war as a means of purification for sure. And I think like they just didn't want to stop to go to the bathroom on the war trail. Always a little mix of pragmatism in there. Elite Super Grunt says it's a cornerstone of my culture. Well, every culture is different. Are you from California? I know how those Californians are. And that's an interesting thing too. Whether it's Californian tribes or tribes in Maine, a lot of them had very similar traditions to this. It would be a little less martial a lot of times. It wouldn't be so much stealing or so much counting coup because that just wasn't a thing in the East or really wasn't a thing in the West. But a lot of sweat lodges, so very common threads throughout. Yeah. Oh, Dan Robertson, good point. So in addition to fasting, the Comanche would do this. I think several Plains tribes would do this. They would drink water until they were just about to throw up, and it was a way to like just prehydrate because you're not going to be able. The way a raid worked was like you're going to ride for possibly days hard. You're not going to stop and eat. You're going to make cold camps, no fires, no nothing like that. Then you're going to fight. Then you're going to have to ride back. And if you don't get out of there, you could get caught again. So there's no time to really eat much. You might not find any water. It is a daunting proposition, even when everything goes according to plan. I think a lot of people think of raiding parties as like, well, we're going to go to here and we're going to stop and make a campfire. And it's like, no campfires, no nothing until you get there. And then you're going to take the prisoners and, end everybody you can, and then we're going to go back. But it's a very stripped down affair. Let's see. Looking at the chat again. All right. Anybody else have anything you want to throw in? Any Sundance stories? Any MK Ultra stories? Were any of you programmed by the government to be here tonight? Put a 1 in the chat if you were programmed to be here tonight, and we will send you a copy of Catcher in the Rye, which I have never read. Considering what I've heard so far, I don't think I want to read it. Patrick says I'm a bot. Elite Super Grunt says 1. All right. Well, I'll send you guys all copies of Catcher in the Rye. All right. Cool. Yeah, I just thought this would be a cool topic to cover. Now everybody has a working knowledge of when we sum this stuff up and we say, oh, they did a Sundance, or there was a war dance, or somebody went through a vision quest, you'll have an idea of the totality of what we're talking about. Pennsylvania Plowboy says, if I tell you I'd have to do something, I'm getting a list. I'm like Palantir right now. I'm taking all your names down. Pet Detective says, wow, drinking that much water can be dangerous. Marathon runners are very aware of just how dangerous overhydration is. Certainly, yeah. I think it's just like you don't have a lot of sports science at the time. So you're just like, well, if we don't have water, we should probably drink as much as we can before we leave. Elite Super Grunt says, the Marines programmed me. Well, that's what they're supposed to do, to be fair, right? Like, that's their whole gig. We got to program somebody, you know? Elite Super Grunt says, I almost died of overhydration. Man, you guys should have talked to these tribes. Maybe you could have saved them some trouble. I've always kind of wondered, like, if you've ever run a marathon or anything like that, and it's like, yeah, I wonder how many of these guys were just like nauseous or cramping and you can't stop. You got to keep going, you know? Let's see. Yeah, I think the rating, actually being out on the rating trail is like way more strenuous than most people understand. All right. So we're going to get kind of to where we're wrapping it up here. Anybody else want to throw in anything else? You know, anything about the Sundance that I don't know? And before we get out of here, we'll talk about some topics we got coming up too. Elite Super Grunt says, if you're overhydrated, you feel sleepy and crash out. The cramps are the worst part. Man, it sounds like it sucks, dude. I've been dehydrated before, though. That sucked. I did the San Diego Marathon in 2007 or something like that, right? And that sucked. It really sucked. It was really hot and everything, and got all the way through it. I was cramping really bad. This, like, I don't know, 70-year-old lady passed me. That really break your spirit. Oh, and somebody gave me, I was pretty hungover. Like, I was like 21. I didn't realize like drinking whiskey, it's not the best idea before running a marathon, but you live and learn, right? So I'm out there going at mile 21. Somebody offers me a beer, and I'm like, you know what? That sounds good right now. So I drink the beer. Didn't help. It was really kind of made things worse. And I get across the finish line, and they give you this little bag of stuff like sandals and whatever. And I just took the bag, I dumped the stuff out of it, and I just started puking in the bag. It was a rough day. Let's see. I believe both the Sundance and Vision Quest are more animalistic versions of spirituality. Yeah, I mean, like, they're primarily animists. Elite Super Grunt, I was stationed at Pendleton in 2008 to 2010. Cool. Yeah, I drove right by there after the marathon. I lived in San Diego for a little bit, so was around that a lot. If you see a bunch of Marines in a bar, you just like be cool, you know? I didn't realize how many Marines were down there until I moved down there. Have any of you been on a vision quest? I guess that's one question I want to ask before we get out of here. Yeah, and while you guys are thinking about that, so our next episode should be coming out maybe Saturday, but we're probably looking more towards Sunday morning right now. That'll be on the battles of the Cheyenne. So going to be some good ones in there. That's why I wanted to get on and do this one, because there's some talk about sun dances and stuff. So it's like, yeah, so you have a basic understanding of what's going on, a holistic understanding of the story. I think the more you understand the personal experiences of the people involved in the story, just like the little things, like, oh, they're probably like really hungry right here, or really cold, or whatever. It really helps grasp the whole story. Because until that, it's just kind of like talking about characters. But when you personalize it and you're like, oh, that had to suck. Let's see. Short stories by Kate. I have not been through a Sundance. Have you been programmed by MK Ultra? If I start flashing these lights, are you going to go like on a mission of some kind. We're not going to do it. Don't worry. We don't need to trigger anybody. But yeah, if you want further reading, certainly look into MK Ultra and look into Sundance's very interesting topics. When they come to your door and ask you about your search history, don't come crying to me though. Does seeing a lizard person count due to sleep deprivation? You know what, Elite Super Grunt? Yes, we'll give you that. That's a ritual of sorts. Let's see. Dan Robertson, I have not been on a vision quest. I found a very specific peak near Comanche Peak that I am under the impression was designated for vision quests. Can you tell us why? Why would it be? Why you think the spot on Comanche Peak was for vision quests? I'd be curious about that. There's some spots in Austin right now designated for vision quests, but they ain't ancient. They're all down on 6th Street. I saw a lizard person and chased it. Bro, don't chase the lizard people. Is that like a Marine thing? You just got to go on the offensive? Let's see. Always question. Yes. Yes. I mean, within reason. You know what I mean? Get out, play a little basketball or something every once in a while. And like I said, when questions come up about your search history, you don't know me. Okay. Thank you. But yeah, so our next topic is going to be Cheyenne. We said last night we got Young Washington coming up. Some stuff on Bigfoot Wallace. Really cool story where Bigfoot Wallace was working the mail train that went from San Antonio to El Paso. If you've ever driven that drive, I don't know how anybody does that on a wagon, right? But that's how these guys were taking the mail. They were down on the Devil's River, and that's one that's like it's actually beautiful out there. But yeah, a really cool story where they were shooting Comanche, and the Comanche were pulling their wounded guys and their dead guys off the battlefield by roping their feet, and then they would like hide in the bushes and pull them back. Like that's a crazy detail, right? Like if that was in the Vietnam War and you heard a guy talking about that today, you'd be like, "Damn, that's wild, dude." So I think a lot of these, like the granular details of these stories, are where our stories are made. Let's see. Elite Super Grunt says, I was on guard. It happened at the Yuma Marine Air Station. So you saw like a lizard person, like a David Icke lizard person. Was he wearing anything, or it's just like a velociraptor? Always question and always take the fifth, says Pet Detectives. That's a professional right there. This guy gets it. Dan Robertson says, the peak is protected yet isolated, definitely used for viewing the Colorado River bend. Peak would not hold horses, only a few men. Okay. Yeah, that would make sense. They call it Comanche Peak for a reason. Perfect to send somebody to hike and spend the vision quest. Yeah, it's you wonder how many spots around here were used for vision quests, right? Actually, right where Mount Bunnell is, there's another Bigfoot Wallace story where he was coming around the bend there. They were up there, I think, chasing a couple natives that were horse thieves. I think they were Kichai, they weren't Comanche, but he came along this really, small trail going this way, going forward, right? And the Kichai were coming back the other way, so they get into this gunfight essentially on like a 2-foot wide cliff, right? And so obviously a wild story. And now Mount Bunnell is like a couple $1 million houses. It's a tourist destination. It's where people go to like soccer moms go to like walk the steps, right? And Custer visited there too. Him and Libby Custer. How am I forgetting Custer's first name? Making myself look really bad, right? George Custer, and Libby spent time in Austin right before going to the Little Bighorn area, and they went to Mount Bunnell. Fair amount too. I think Libby really liked it. So it's got a long history. It's got a long history all through that area. Elite Super Grunt says he saw a humanoid lizard person with a tail. Wow, man. That's a hell of a story. And he just like went away or what? You got to call David Icke, man. Pennsylvania Plowboy says, just play dumb. Yep, exactly. I know nothing. I see nothing. All right. Elite Super Grunt. He's going to continue this story here. I was patrolling through the tents and thought it was another Marine going back to the head, which is the bathroom, right? I went to check and then noticed they were walking funny and had a tail. I ran and it ran and disappeared. Now, do we know what is the enlistment policy for lizards within the Marines, though? It would help to know that. Let's see. We got some wild comments tonight. Ended up talking just as much about MK Ultra as the Sundance, but such is life. The lizard guy disappeared around the corner of the tents. I told my squad leader, and he told me a similar story. Well, can we report this up the chain? Do we just say, like, that's the local lizard person, or can we go talk to the next guy? Let's see. Similar story to his time in Iraq. Yeah, I've heard a lot of, like, I think we were talking about that last night, a lot of, like, really weird stories out of Afghanistan and Iraq. Let's see. Scrolling through the chat here. Anybody got any suggestions for upcoming live chat subjects? We're always open to suggestions, upcoming episodes as well. And have you been enjoying our shorts? We're putting out lots of shorts. It's fun to make those because we get to pick, like, the best, the most action-packed moment from the episodes. Sometimes our stories are like slow burns, like they're like a Grateful Dead song or something. It takes, you gotta get into it, but once you hit the peak, it's gonna be wild. Let's see. Pennsylvania Plowboy says, "Yeah, I really like the shorts." Good, man. Those are fun to put out. It's kind of fun to pick, like, well, what's gonna make the best short? Yeah, we'll be doing more streams. I might even add some, like, shorter streams earlier in the day too, because there's other stuff I wanted to cover, like just like the warrior societies of the Cheyenne. I think I'd like to cover that in a shorter stream. It's hard to, like, pull that into a whole hour, but we could go over that in 20, 30 minutes because that's a pretty unique thing for the Plains tribes. Other tribes had societies, but the Cheyenne have tons of warrior societies. I didn't, until I started researching it, I thought it was pretty much just the dog soldiers and not the dog soldiers. But there's the kit fox, there's, I think, the elk, there's the dog soldiers, and they all have their own, like, little subculture. Let's see. Elite Super Grunt says, I was an RO with secret security clearance. They knew I was into weird stuff. Imagine if I told their higher up what I saw. We better hope they're not looking at this chat, man. So I guess up the chain wasn't an option. But listen, I'm not going to say anything when they come and ask me. I probably will. But you better hope they're not watching this chat. Short Stories by Kate. It is. The host does a great job. Thank you very much, Short Stories by Kate. We have a good time. We can kind of meld all of our interests together. Let's see. Wow, there's a lot of people in the chat again. Good to see everybody. What is today? Thursday? Anybody watching? I guess, is Thursday night football over? Let's see. What is also Elite Super Grunt? What's an RO? Tons of acronyms. I told you all that yesterday. I'm terrible with acronyms. So I can't be in the medical field. Even with YouTube has all kinds of stats like CPM, what is it? CTR. It's like, it'd be easier to just say the words at this point. Elite Super Grunt. Oh, radio operator. Okay. Need the civilian translation. Dan Robinson says, read the trees. They were original trail street markers. Yeah, that's true. 35 itself was an old buffalo trail, right? That was, like, frequented by all the tribes. And Broadway in New York was an old trail. Lots of, like, main highways and streets today were old trails, and they were already marked out. Yeah, so it made surveying a little easier. I was a squad radio operator for 3rd 1st Kilo Company, 1st Platoon. Did I say that right? Well, thank you for your service. Hope you had a good time, at least in Pendleton. They got you guys running around all over Pendleton. When you drive by there, it's just tank tracks everywhere. I remember driving by there and like, well, what the hell are they sending you guys? I thought it'd be like more like a football field size course to like practice tanks on. It's like, no, we're going to send you out to Las Vegas, it looks like. Oh yeah, Nat says, Semper Fi. Pet Detective says, thank you for your service. Yeah, thank you. We always appreciate it. All right. Anybody else have anything they want to contribute tonight before we hop off? We won't be doing one tomorrow night. We have an episode, or like, no, it might be, it depends on the editing, right? You're getting a behind the scenes look here. But tomorrow night we won't have a stream. Saturday we will have a stream, if not the episode. It'll depend. Like if we get the episode out on Saturday, that'll be an episode day, and if we don't, then we'll do a stream then. Let's see, we got lots of. Let's see what else we have coming up. The special ops episode. I want to do a music episode where we talk about what music was like in the Old West for both the tribes and the settlers. Let's see. I think food in the Old West would be a good one. And then like lots more paranormal stuff. I want to do like a Wendigo one. We can do a Dogman one. We can do all kinds of stuff. Anything that doesn't fit in episodes, we can put in here. All right, I'm going to scan the chat one more time. Elite Super Grunt says 4 to 7 mile runs daily. My knees are wrecked. Man, that's not easy. The knees are tough, man. You can jog, but when they make you run, that's tough. Hopefully that's not with like the pack and everything. Oh yeah. Net says, am I saying that right? Onyet. Oh yeah. Onyet says Eastern tribes. Yeah, I know we got to do more on the Eastern tribes. There's just so much, we started out as kind of a really Comanche heavy channel. And like, I've been fascinated with the Eastern tribes, the Iroquois, Algonquin since I was a little kid. That was the Indian in a cupboard. So yeah, we'll cover a lot more of those. If I can fit it, if the algorithm doesn't give me too much trouble, I'd like to do something on torture methods because it is gruesome, but it's really interesting. And the Eastern tribes probably had the worst, I think the most complex for sure. Elite Super Grunt, can you do a video covering the Karankawa? Yeah, if we don't do an episode on it, we could. There's a couple good Karankawa battles though, but we might just do like an episode on Texas tribes as well because they don't get covered enough. The Tonkawa don't get covered enough. The Karankawa are really interesting. There's a lot of lore around them, and one of the first Texas tribes that were contacted because they're kind of southeast. Elite Super Grunt says, I'm a carpenter now. I swing a hammer every day. Awesome. That's a good trade, man. AI is not coming for you. Oh, yeah. Also, Eastern tribe suggestions, the Delaware and the Lenape. Absolutely. The Mohegan, the, what else? I know I'm leaving big ones out here. The Mohawk, obviously. I was thinking we could do a good movie for Thanksgiving would be Squanto, an American hero. Any takers on that one? And I'm thinking about making this stew, this like venison squash stew. If you've ever watched Tasting History with Max Miller, highly recommend. That's a great channel, great history, and the guy makes like really interesting recipes. And he's got a venison stew recipe from the first Thanksgiving meal. I know there's a lot of like historical consternation on that, but there was an actual first Thanksgiving. It wasn't called Thanksgiving at the time, obviously. There was a meal. This is one of the dishes from it, the venison stew. So it might be interesting to make that and watch Squanto. One or the other, at least, right? We can watch Squanto. I haven't seen that movie in like 25 years. I'm used to watch it all the time. Because people forget Squanto got taken back to London. He was like a celebrity for a while. All right. So yeah, that's the ideas coming up. If you have any suggestions, if you can't, like, comments would be a good place. Also email me at history@theokcorral@gmail.com if you have any suggestions on episodes or books. We're always looking for little known books because those have the best stories in them. Elite Super Grunt says, I live in the area where the Kawankawa used to be. So you're Southeast Texas? We're going to figure out where you live and then send the lizard people there. Short Stories by Kate says, I love Tasting History with Max Miller. Oh, you have his book too. Waiting on the HOKC book. That is coming. We're compiling several stories. We're going to put a lot of stuff that we can't put on YouTube. It's just like straight up too intense. It's not for gratuity's sake, but because it needs to be told. And we want to get a graphic artist. So if anybody knows like a was it the guy that illustrated 300, Zach Miller, any of that kind of type of art, let me know because we're looking for somebody to do graphic pictures, graphic kind of comic book pictures for this. Space Cowboy, what's up, man? Been waiting to see you all night. Says Townsend's channel is also a great channel. Yeah, Townsend, he's like the gold standard for history YouTubers. Great recipes too. And it's just that's another way of like granularly diving into how these people lived. Elite Super Grunt says San Patricio County, a hot spot, man. I don't know if that's a hot spot for lizard people, but apparently Camp Pendleton is, right? Do you worry about seeing them anymore? You just living your life now? You're not like worried about seeing them again? Space Cowboy. Good to see you. He gave me the salute, so that's why I'm saluting. Oh, anybody else? Yeah, before we jump off, does anybody else have any good channel suggestions? Not to like draw traffic away from here, right? But a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you have any good history channel suggestions, throw them in the chat too. Because everybody likes to like poke around. So what are you looking to publish? A compilation of stories that we weren't able to put on the channel, probably focusing on Texas history first, but the more really intense raids and battles and like stuff that we can't really put in a show for YouTube because it involves the R word a lot of times, or the descriptions are just far too graphic. So we can't really put them in granular detail in an episode, but we can in a book. So that's the plan. My buddy does graphic novels. He is pretty famous on YouTube. Can you either suggest his channel here or hit me up with an email, man? We're looking for somebody and somebody we can like communicate with, because it's hard to find somebody online and you're not like getting the point across. Elite Super Grunt says the aliens came for me once. I've seen a UFO, but yeah, I am good. Or you've seen it all. I've never seen anything in my life. I thought I heard a ghost one time, but it was a cow in the trees. Let's see. Dan Robertson says, awesome. Looking forward to that. You must be an audiobook narrator. I am not, but if anybody needs one, I'll do it. That'd probably be good for us to put out an audiobook. Let's see. Short Stories by Kate says 10-4. Yeah, that should be. We're excited about that. That's been a long time coming. And when we first started, we didn't really know what YouTube would and wouldn't allow. Now we have a pretty good grasp of that. And some of the stuff that it won't allow, it's like, well, this has got to go somewhere. These stories are too good, especially for people that if you already like old West history, it's like, well, it's right up your alley. And it's kind of in the tradition of these older books like Indian Depredations in Texas and the Texas Rangers by Walter Prescott Webb, where it's not uh, it's not one holistic story, it's a collection of stories. So it's like maybe kind of like a coffee table book where it's like you can read, one or two at a time. You don't need to keep going to keep everything in context. It's as fun as it can be for being full of horrific stories, right? Let's see here. And we got a lot of people in the chat again. Thank you to everybody for showing up. Maybe Doug Tenapel. He created Earthworm Jim. Okay, let me look him up. Welcome to the Rebellion is a great channel. Okay, we'll have to watch that too. A lot of you guys are conduits for stuff that I don't know, unless the YouTube algorithm shows it to me, I don't know that it exists. All right. Oh, and tomorrow I'll be going to Half Price Books to pick up some new stuff. So we'll have lots of new material coming at you guys. And like I said, stay tuned for some like shorter streams. Maybe I'm thinking about doing like a coffee talk stream midday. What do you guys think about that? And we'll just go over some shorter stuff that we're not able to cover here. Let's see. Ask Ripaverse. Okay. I'll write all this stuff down. Ripaverse. Okay, cool. And we'll try to work something out where like we'll figure something out for the members where everybody gets a big discount or something. We'll make it worth your while. Doug Tenapel has a few YouTube channels. Okay, cool. Doug Tenapel. Write that down. Doug Tenapel. Okay. Stories by Kate says mid-morning chat would be a nice break in the day. Cool. It won't be tomorrow. We're all booked up. Got a bunch of stuff I got to do, but maybe Saturday. And we'll cover stuff like, what the episode's going to have in it or different stories from these. I got tons of books. I was thinking about like this one's a great one, Texas Rangers by Walter Prescott Webb. And like I was saying, there's just a collection of stories. So we could just go over one of the stories. A lot of times they're great stories, but they just don't fit the motif that we've got where it's like, it's not necessarily someone versus someone. It's just this person getting attacked, but it's a great story. Does anybody have Indian Depredations in Texas too? That's like a classic book. If you're into this stuff. When you all take a break from your Bigfoot and conspiracy reading, it's nice to have some Texas Ranger stories. All right. I'm going to scroll one more time through the chats. If anybody has any recommendations, get them in now. And we'll kind of wrap everything up. Let's take a look. One more final look at the poll. We have 58% of you guys said you would do a Sundance. All right. So what we'll do is organize some kind of HOKC Sundance. I will preside. I will not be participating. We'll get everybody a t-shirt, We'll have a trophy for the guy that lasts the longest. I'm just kidding. There's no way we could get that insured. Let's see. Elite Super Grant says, I went to the Texas Rangers Museum in San Antonio last year. Yeah, we're planning on making a trip there too. And the Roosevelt Hotel, or where they met with the Rough Riders, and obviously the Alamo. We're wanting to do some road trips to kind of go to these places. The Battle of Plum Creek is in Lockhart, half an hour away. So I'd like to go there. What other titles would you recommend to read in regards to the Comanche? The Comanche by Pema Heckelman, something like that. They have a very, I think like Nordic last name, Pema Heckelen, Pemma. But the Comanche, it's about the actual tribe. It's not like talking about each individual battle. It's about how the tribe evolved, where they came from, how they worked, and like just in, like I said, minute detail. It's really, really good. Whereas like Empire on the Summer Moon is a fantastic book, but it has a more circumspect description of the Comanche. This is, in minute, painstaking detail, but it's really, really valuable to know. Virginia City, Nevada would be a great meetup place. I've been there before too. Isn't that where you're from, Space Cowboy? You're not too far from Art Bell. Let's see. Well, yeah. So thank you all so much for coming out. Like I said, stay tuned. Lots of good stuff coming up. And like I said, please let us know if you have any suggestions. We got tons of stuff in the pipeline, and we'll be kind of diverting a little bit more. We got some World War I stuff coming up. I think some samurai stuff coming up. I got some stuff I'm working on with the Romans. We'll see how we can make that work. Lots of stuff. We're going to be going all over the place because I think it's just, it's worthwhile. If you like history, there's lots of common themes throughout, right? So if you like Comanche battles, you'll probably like Mongol battles. You would like the host of WTTR. He is a history teacher. Okay, cool. I got that written down too. WTTR. All right. Yeah, so thanks everybody for coming out again. Let me write that down actually one more time. WTTR. And like I said, we'll have another episode out, several shorts out tomorrow, another episode on Saturday or Sunday, and whatever day we don't have the episode, which I'll be keeping you all posted, we'll have another live stream. So lots of stuff coming. Stay tuned. And thank you all again for all the support and for tuning in. So we'll see you next time and take care. God bless. Bye.